Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all nerdy things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. I'm Dan. I use he, him pronouns. Today we are joined by Jeff Trammell, the head writer for Craig of the Creek, a fantastic voice actor, and DC Comics' newest Red Hood writer. How are you, Jeff?
I'm great. I mean, that's a lot of titles you gave me, so I appreciate them.
I'm telling you, I've honestly been sitting. We have this, like, I can only describe it as a adult beanbag. It's called a love sack. I've literally been sitting in it pretty much all day, just watching Craig of the Creek. It is such a good show.
Oh, thank you. That sounds like the life to me, by the way, just sitting in a beanbag watching a show that I work on.
Let me tell you what, it is probably the best purchase I've ever made. I work a lot, so like when I don't, I get to read comics and then do all that kind of stuff. So I was like, I'm going to invest in something that makes me happy. So if you're ever in the market for a gigantic beanbag, Love Sack is where to go.
I'm taking notes now. Also, we'll try to get them to sponsor this episode.
Man, I just want anyone to sponsor us. I emailed MeUndies, and I was like, just come on, just give me this.
How'd that go?
I haven't heard back yet. They this is not sponsored, but I think it's really cool how they have all sort of body shapes in their ads.
Yes.
Which, as a big guy, like, it means a lot to me. So I would like to work with someone who does things like that. But this today, this is about you. So we always start our interviews off with sort of a hard-hitting question. What's your favorite sandwich?
I like a typical Italian sub.
Yes.
You know, some salami, some provolone, you know, kind of, you go to like a Jersey Mike's or something, just like a classic Italian is my go-to. I'm very picky, though, with my toppings or fillings or whatever you call what goes on the sandwich. I'm usually just like a lettuce and pickles kind of guy.
Okay.
Very boring.
Yeah. Do you do oil and vinegar?
I will do that sometimes. I'll do that if I think I'm going to eat the whole thing. If I think I'm going to save it to the next day, I won't, because I don't want the soggy bread kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll mix it up. Maybe I'll do like a little bit of mayo or some mustard.
When you're feeling feisty.
Yeah.
Our friend Lan Pitts wants to know, how do you stay so fly?
God, I wish I knew. I was born this way, baby. No, honestly, I it's one of those things where like I don't think I am. So I appreciate Lan for putting that into the ether, but I don't feel fly at all.
So, as I told you, I've been watching a lot of Craig of the Creek, and I do want to ask you a couple questions, general questions for the audience and people who are kind of new to the whole TV thing. What does it mean to be the head writer of a show?
Honestly, it depends on the show. For us, we're a storyboard-driven show, which, for those who don't know, there's two types of shows in animation, basically a script-driven and a board-driven. Script-driven shows are basically the writers come up with a premise and an outline, then they write a script, and then the artists storyboard based on that script. And it's pretty much usually sticks pretty in line to what's on that script, so they can't really go stray from the page. Whereas in a board-driven show, we take it to premise and then outline, and it's kind of like a blueprint for the story. Mm-hmm. So we'll follow like the emotional beats, the comedy, the just like the story arc, and then that goes to the board artist, and then they will do pitch where they do the drawings and the dialogue, and then they bring it back to us and pitch it, and then we'll go through it as a group and kind of like, this, I don't know if this part was emotional enough, maybe we need to beef this up, or maybe we need to get a shot of Craig's face so we can see how he's feeling in the moment, or we'll punch up jokes. I don't know if this joke got a big enough laugh, so let's try something else. And it's really collaborative, and it allows the artist to really like have a lot more say in the storytelling, as well as like the writers can still kind of like get their 2 cents in as well. So it's not just like you hand it off and then it's done. Everybody's still working on it in different stages. So for Craig, as the head writer, I oversee when we have freelancers on and our staff writer, as well as like come up with kind of like long-term story points, as well as like an overview of the season along with the creators and directors. And so I'm overseeing that. I'm in a majority of the meetings regarding like story stuff with the artists. I also voice direct records. I sit in on edits sometimes. So for me, it's kind of like a bunch of different things that I get to oversee, which is nice because it feels like a good training ground for eventually, like if I were to run a show, I know how to do a lot more than just run a writing room. I know how to do plenty of other things now because of the job on Craig.
That's incredible. You really do a lot.
Yeah, it's a busy job, but it's fun too.
So with these storyboarders collaborating with the writers, what does a typical writer's room look like for a show like Craig?
For Craig, our room is normally comprising of myself and our staff writer, Ashley Hairston, the co-creators, Matt Burnett and Ben Levin, and our director, Tiffany Ford. And the way our show is made up, as a board-driven show, our teams have 5 weeks to do the episode, from the handout to like finishing it and cleaning it up. And most shows have a 5-week cycle, but Craig actually has a 6-week cycle. So that 6 week, they do not have to board, and they are just free to attend the writing meetings. That way our room is always evolving because there's always 2 more people in there, 2 of the board artists. So if we're telling a story that is like very specific to a character with Latinx heritage, we might try to save that story to work on until Angel Lorenzana is in the room, where they can help us craft that story a bit better. So it really allows us to kind of like not just like, our room is very diverse as is, but it is constantly flowing and changing. So we can really like pinpoint the kind of stories we want to tell.
And with those things like diversity, is that something you keep in mind when the show is being made? Like, are you trying to tell these diverse stories from people who've experienced things like that?
Definitely. That's been since day one. Like, Craig has always been wanting to tell very diverse stories, have a diverse representation. And we've been, not just in our borders and not just in like the artists we freelance to or bring in, but also like our crew is full of diverse people. And our storytelling doesn't stop at the writing room. It's not like only writers or artists can pitch. Like, everyone on our show is welcome to come talk to us and pitch ideas and let us know like, oh, I think this story was a misstep, or I saw the pitch last week and actually, I feel like maybe we should do something like this. And by allowing our crew to like, there's no filter. It's just like, if anyone has a thought, they can come tell us. And everyone's very open to making sure that everyone is very like happy and proud of the show we work on. So we're going to take all the advice we can from everybody who wants to share it, because at the end of the day, we all just want the show to be something we can be proud to like show our families and friends.
That's incredible to hear. That makes me just really happy. Like, this is the first time I've gotten to talk to someone who works on a show meant for younger audiences. So hearing things like that makes me really excited that that's something that's kept in mind. With that, how did it feel being nominated for an NAACP Image Award?
Incredible. We had we're on our third season now, and this is our first NAACP nomination. And it's one of those things that we had kind of like been striving for, but always kind of fell short. And we've been fortunate enough to be nominated for a few things. We've been nominated for an Annie, an Emmy, NAACP award, GLAAD award, and like every nomination is extremely cool, not just because of the prospect that we could win this thing, but it's also bringing more eyes to the show. And whether we win or not, like that's always the important thing, is more people learn about the show and more people can hopefully see it and watch it and connect with those characters and, get that representation that they might have been missing out on prior to the show existing. So honestly, like just being nominated in itself is like one of the coolest things. And then we're up against some really fun shows too. So it's nice to be noticed by the big awards and just kind of like put the show on everyone else's radar.
And with the show, I was trying to word this better. We kind of see the world through kids' eyes, and it's not like one of those like where the world breaks off into some fantasy. It's pretty grounded most of the time. Mm-hmm. How do you approach writing that?
Usually we try to root all of our stories in some sort of emotion or feeling. And I think that's what helps everything feel grounded. So even when it does go like on like this cosmic scale of kid imagination, there's still that like nugget of truth in that, we did an episode with Deltron, who's like this kid from the future, and like he's got to get this stuff to go back to the future. And that's a very like wild story, but it's rooted in Craig feeling like unimportant because it's his brother is going to the prom. So Craig is like, well, everyone's paying attention to my brother. I'm just like, everyone's forgotten about me. I want to do something important. And then he gets to help this kid who's going to go save the future do this thing. So for us, it's just like kind of finding that relatability and how do we as the audience connect to these characters. And then that allows us to tell very like truthful stories or very like huge blown up stories, but you still get the core value of what our kind of lesson is.
Something else I really noticed as I was been watching is Craig's family as a whole really is just full of love. And there's no sort of making someone to be, no one ever feels undercut. Like there's never writing or situations that make the parents feel incapable of caring about their kids and things like that. So it's a very wholesome, like realistic family. Mm-hmm. How do you approach writing in that kind of style that gives everyone their own spotlight?
It helps that everyone on the crew feels very strongly about the positive representation of Craig and his family, and everyone kind of has their favorites. So when it gets to a certain episode, like if someone loves Bernard's going to get a nice shine, or the same with Jessica or Dwayne or Nicole or the grandparents. So everybody's kind of like actively making sure that the characters that they love are portrayed in a fun, positive way, but also like, sadly, a lot of times this representation is the first of its kind in like a 6-11 animation spot. So for that reason, like we want to make sure that this is a positive, loving family that's being portrayed, and that everyone either is getting that at home and gets to see that, or everyone gets to see what they wish. I wish my family was more like Craig's. And it's tough to kind of find that balance, but it's also one of those things that's worth it. It's worth like kind of going back to the drawing board to nail those things and really like make sure they're memorable. So when we do like the Thanksgiving special, or when we do like an episode at the grandparents' house, it feels special. And, you kind of get the warm tinglies inside because this feels like something you experienced or something you wanted to experience.
I have to try to find better, like, in-between questions, because, like, these kind of answers always kind of take me aback because I'm so just inspired by things like that. So,
thank you.
It's such good work.
Thank you.
What part of, this is a listener question, what part of working on Craig of the Creek has surprised you the most in a positive way?
How incredible the crew is. I talk about this a lot. But, when I first saw Craig, I saw the pilot when I went in to basically interview at Cartoon Network. And I was coming off of a show called Harvey Beaks over Nickelodeon, and that was my first show. And it was created by Carl Greenblatt, who created Chowder. And the crew was incredible. Like, everyone hung out. Because sometimes on shows, like, the writers will just hang out with the writers and the artists will just hang out with the artists. And it wasn't like that on Harvey. It was a very, like, close-knit group. People hung out after work and played board games and video games. And it was just like, it was a great time. And I knew even then that, like, that wasn't the norm. And I was like, this is a special thing that I probably won't get again. But going into Craig, where I was one of the first quote unquote artists on the art side hired for that show, I knew that, like, that was something I really wanted, was another kind of Harvey vibe. And luckily that was what Matt and Ben wanted coming from Steven. And as the show staffed up, it was just staffed up with more and more, like, talented people who cared, like, so much, and were also just, like, excited about the show, excited about the prospect of telling these stories, and just excited to hang out. And that crew continues to deliver, even though I know they're all tired, even though I know their arms are, like, falling apart from all the incredible drawings they do, and everyone still gives it 110%. It's an incredible crew full of people who care about that show so much and are willingly sharing their ideas. And before the pandemic, like, we were always hanging out after work, playing video games. At one point, there was 3 D&D groups on the crew. Even now, like, people still hang out on Discord and watch each other stream video games and play Dead by Daylight to get, like, it's a very tight-knit crew. Like, I didn't go to college, but I always say this is what I imagine a college campus is like, just a bunch of people who love hanging out together. And that's what this show is. And it never really feels like work because it just feels like you're hanging out with everybody, and everybody's also just killing it. Like, it's incredible. I am constantly in awe of every single person in that crew, and I couldn't be more proud to work with them.
Do you think that type of environment makes it easier to collaborate as well? Like, because you kind of understand where the other people are coming from?
100%. I know, like, very early on, I would write my outline. I wouldn't sit at my desk. I hated my office because it was just me. And there's a whole crew of people out here. So I actually bought a laptop because I used to work on my desktop at the office. And I bought a laptop and I would go work on my stories in the other artists' offices, because that allowed me to kind of hang out with them and get to know them as people. And once I know they're, like, what they're into and, like, where their comedy lies, that makes it a lot easier for me to write stories to them where I'm like, oh, well, this is going to be, like, a very family-centric episode. So this would be great for Tiffany and Jason. Or this episode is very wacky and goofy. I know Charmaine can nail this. Or here's a huge action episode. I know Naja and Deshawn will knock this out of the park. So it really allowed me to kind of be able to write to everyone's strengths, as well as, like, if I know that Ashley loves writing the elders, then I can make sure that when we have an elder episode coming up, that'll go to Ashley because I know she'll be excited about it. So it really, like, definitely made for a much more creative environment for me because I got to hang out with all these people and see what they were excited about. But also, like, there's that openness where now they feel like they can talk to me. So if there's, like, oh, I don't know about this part in the story, can I change it? It's not like we show up at a pitch and it's brand new. It's like they talk to me and we try to talk out, oh, what bumped you? What if we did this? Okay, great. And then I kind of know what they're thinking going into those changes as well.
I'm just so excited to talk about this stuff. I've only gotten to see season 1 and 2 because that's all that's on that HBO Max right now. So I'm excited to check out season 3. But we do have to get into your DC writing as well, because I know you had when we initially talked, I knew you had a comics project coming up. And you didn't start small either. You came out the gates with Jason Todd. So you're writing Jason Todd in Truth and Justice number 4. What makes him such an appealing character to you?
So Jason, okay, so I started reading comics when I was young, and then I kind of fell out of it. And then I picked up my first comic back in 2008 after The Dark Knight came out. It was Brian Azzarello's Joker. And then from there, I started reading other stuff. I read Identity Crisis and a bunch of other books I would get from the library. And eventually I read Hush. And one of the big moments in Hush is that Jason Todd comes back, presumably, but it's not him because it's Clayface, but actually it is him because it's a retcon or something. But, you know, like that was my first introduction to Jason, and it was like a big deal that he came back in that book. And I was like, well, who is this guy? So I went and I looked into him and his backstory and found out about the vote and the crowbarring from the Joker and everything. And I've always kind of like been the guy who likes the characters that other people kind of don't like, if that makes sense. Like when I was a kid and we were playing Ninja Turtles, nobody wanted to be Leo, so I would be Leo. Or, you know, as a wrestling fan growing up, like there's Edge and Christian and there's the Hardy Boys and everybody loves Edge and everybody loves Jeff Hardy, but nobody's giving love to Matt or Christian. So I'm fans of Matt and Christian. So seeing that Jason was kind of like, you know, the secondary Robin, the forgotten Robin, I became a fan of him. And then I read, you know, the Under the Red Hood stuff and became a bigger fan of him. So since, like, I've been on the Jason train since then, basically since he came back. And, you know, like when Under the Red Hood movie came out, I was like, big into that. Obviously, when there were rumors he was going to be in the Arkham Knight game, I was like, yes, like our boy, you know, like I've seen Jason get shafted along the way, but I've also seen all the cool moments too. So, yeah, like I've been a fan of Jason for a really long time, and I've always wanted to tell a story with Jason. I actually pitched a Jason Todd TV show within the last few years. So like I've always been a fan of Jason. So getting the opportunity to write Jason for DC Comics as my first thing was like a dream come true. And I'm really proud of the story I got to tell with him that I'm really excited for you guys to read at some point. But yeah, like this is, you know, I always say that my two favorite DC characters are Jason and Static. So getting to tell his Jason story, like right out the gate, I couldn't have asked for anything else outside of Static, who's a little busy with the milestone stuff.
Yeah. Did you see that redesign?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Oh, he looks so good. I'm so pumped. The whole milestone line looks incredible. I'm excited to see who the teams are, but honestly, I didn't think I was going to come to this interview and hear Jason Todd and Matt Hardy in the same breath, which is awesome. But also, a huge part of Jason's lore is the Joker, who is on the cover of your issue. Is he in the story? Are we allowed to ask that?
Sure, I think you can ask that. Is Joker in the story? I'm gonna play it safe and say Smart. Maybe.
That's a good answer. What can you tell us about your story?
I can tell you that my story is about Jason looking into someone from his past and some events that have led him to where he is now. And in looking into this former friend of his, it sends him on an adventure that I don't think anyone's gonna see coming. It's a very it's so hard to do this without spoiling anything. But it's not what you think it is, I think, is the only thing I can say from seeing that cover. It's gonna go down some roads, and I think it's gonna be a fun journey.
I'm excited. We do have a couple more questions from our mutual friend Kira. They asked, what was your favorite part about getting to write for DC?
Oh man. Being able to say that I wrote for DC, I think.
Yeah.
Like I've been a fanboy for 12 years or so. So like seeing my name in the solicit is insane. Like I had back when I lived in Detroit, I had a local comic place I would go to called Stadium Cards and Comics out in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Feel free to hit them up. And that was where I would go to get my comics. And my fiance, like we went there so much, my fiance started to work there on Wednesday mornings, and we would go early and she would stock comics for the day, for New Comic Book Day. And we would literally go every single Wednesday before they open and just hang out. So to go from like sitting in that comic shop and like marking solicits to pull, and now like knowing that they'll be ordering a book I wrote is insane. And also like getting like, because I did this for them back in like October, November, this work, and getting like the DC Comics Christmas card was really cool. And that moment where you get like a check and it's just DC Comics and it's got your name on it is, it's unreal.
It's so cool. I still get nervous when I get emails from DC, so I feel you. How was it writing? How was writing a comic different than writing for television?
It was, the pacing is very interesting because, when I'm writing for TV, I kind of like know, I know where the act breaks go. I know what the structure is, but in writing for a comic, they're still the same thing, but there's not as much time. Like, conversely, like 30, 40 page comic compared to like writing for an 11-minute show. There's a lot more you can do. And I think I had to think more visually, which luckily I work in animation. So I think pretty visually as is, but it's a different level of like, it's one thing to say like, okay, so in this scene, Craig sneaks into his house and then he goes upstairs and he finds this thing, but like when you have to break down like panel by panel and really think like, okay, so Jason's on the roof, he's looking down at Gotham. In the next panel, Jason, lands on the street. He's, like it's so much, it's a different set of skills, if that makes sense, because it's one thing to kind of like build a scene, but it's different to kind of like break it down, and everything that I say or don't say is going to end up in that panel. So if I'm like very specific, like that's the thing about writing for Craig too, is like, since we're board driven, you have to find this balance where it's not so specific that the board artist doesn't have any leniency or any room to kind of figure stuff out, but not so vague that they don't know what you want, right? And in comics, I also didn't know who my artist was going to be at the time that I was writing it. So I had to be very like, I had to spell out a lot of things just to make sure that they were how I envisioned them. And because I didn't know who I was working with, luckily I got to work with Rob Guillory, who is just great at like putting in like background gags and like really kind of like, oh, I thought maybe we should tweak this. And like, it's definitely a tweak for the better. I was working with like someone who knows comics and is a veteran, but I also didn't know that at the time. So I was like really spelling stuff out. So I think it made for an interesting kind of like balance of me as this guy who's written TV for 5 years on a dozen shows to go to like a medium where I felt like I was brand new again,
Yeah. I didn't know that you didn't know who your artist was. That's very interesting to see that you wrote this stuff before that, but then you got to collaborate afterwards. It's good to know. And Kira had one final question. Have you made any extravagant purchases lately?
Always. I recently bought, I think the most extravagant purchase I've made recently is a few months ago, I bought a 30-something inch statue of Lord Drakon, who is from the Power Rangers comic books, sitting on a throne with all the Rangers helmets all destroyed around him. So I bought that. It was very expensive. It's huge, and I don't have anywhere to put it, so it sits in the corner of my living room. And knowing that I don't have room for this thing, they recently did one of the White Ranger, and I was like, well, I gotta buy that. So I bought that too. So that'll be here at some point.
Is it the one where his feet are on the Rangers' heads?
Yes.
I looked at it. I get yelled at a lot because I keep buying more action figures because I'm like, I don't want to spring and buy a big statue because where am I going to put it? But then all of my action figures sit on my desk. So I just bought the pumpkin wrapper from Mighty Morphin.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I have him. I have a putty sitting next to him, and I actually have Draken as well, sit all on my desk amongst all my other DC things.
That's sick.
So I feel you. I just got Death Metal Batman, so the one with the leather jacket and scythe. What was I gonna do? Pass that up?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to just buy all this stuff and then deal with it later, or put in some shelves, or buy a house.
I think that's where it's gonna have to end up. They did another wave the other day, and they said they released the birds from the movie. I know exactly. I can't think Tengu
of it.
Warriors.
Yes, the Tengu Warriors. Yep.
And my brain was melted. I was working, so I had to put a small break on my calendar to go order them. So I feel you. I feel you very much, and I'm very jealous of your statue. So our final question is also a kind of a heavy one. If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
What would it do? I'm trying to think of something there's so many options. This is tough. If I had a Rube Goldberg machine, I would set it before I go to sleep to wake me up, and then I'd step on a conveyor belt that would move me throughout my house like the Jetsons. I'm gonna go full on crazy with it since it's the question.
Do it.
It'll I'll go through the shower and everything. It'll be making coffee to sit on my desk. It'll boot up my computer so I don't have to wait for it to do that. Because I'm notorious with just leaving my computer on forever, so I don't have to boot it up.
Same.
And it would lead me right to this chair, where then I would sit and take a cup of coffee, and then I would hit one word on my keyboard or one letter on my keyboard, and then it would type my outline, and then the machine would take me back to bed, back to sleep.
Oh, hard day, back to bed. Jeff, I am so excited that you were here. This was incredible. When can people find your Truth and Justice?
You can find my Truth and Justice. It drops digital first on March 12th. And then the subsequent Fridays, another chapter will drop. And then you can collect the physical version when that hits the stores on May 18th.
And where can we find Craig of the Creek?
You can find Craig of the Creek on Cartoon Network, on the Cartoon Network app. If you want to watch season 3, which I believe is still currently on there, you can also catch seasons 1 and 2 on HBO Max.
Good to know about season 3. You can find us at gatecrashers.fan, on Twitter at gatecrasherspod, and on Instagram at gatecrasherspod. We'll see you next week.
It's the Gatecrashers.